I've been doing late-night deliveries for almost 2 years now. Most of the time it's uneventful. Pick up, drop off, maybe a polite thank you if I'm lucky. But one Thursday night on Eastwood Street changed everything. The order seemed simple. A large pepperoni pizza to an old apartment building just outside the city. The place looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. Water-stained bricks, broken lights buzzing above the entrance, and a stench of mildew that hit me the moment I walked in. The stairwell was narrow and damp, my footsteps echoing louder than they should have. The building felt dead, like no one really lived there. Still, I climbed to the third floor, balancing the pizza box under one arm. When I reached the door, apartment 3B, I knocked. At first, no one answered. Then the door creaked open an inch. A single pale eye peered through the crack, bloodshot and unblinking. The voice that followed was raspy, almost childlike. "You're late." I forced a laugh. "Sorry, the rain slowed me down. Here's your order." The door opened a little wider, just enough for a pale, bony hand to snake out and snatch the box. The person didn't even look at me, just lifted the lid of the pizza, staring inside like it held some secret. Then, without warning, he said, "Where's the other one?" I frowned. "The other one?" "The second pizza. I ordered 2. I checked my app. Only one listed. "Sorry, sir, there's just the one on the order. Maybe there was a mistake?" That's when the door slammed shut, hard. I sighed, muttered under my breath, and started down the hall. But before I reached the stairs, I felt something sting my neck, a sharp jab. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying flat on my back, duct tape binding my wrists and ankles. My mouth was gagged. The room was pitch black, except for a single bulb swaying overhead. The smell was overwhelming, like copper, and mold, and rotten meat. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I realized I wasn't on the floor. I was lying on a long wooden table. Beside me, on a counter, sat rows of knives, long carving knives, cleavers, and even a hacksaw. The man from the door shuffled into the light. He was tall and skeletal, wearing a filthy apron streaked with dark stains. His bald scalp gleamed with sweat, and his face twitched as if he were fighting himself. "You forgot the second pizza," he whispered, his voice shaking. "But it's okay. I can make more." He held up a butcher knife, running his finger slowly along the edge until blood beaded at the tip. Then he licked it clean. My heart slammed against my chest. I tried to speak, but the gag muffled everything. He leaned close, his breath sour and wet. "You know what I like most about fresh meat? It screams." I thrashed against the duct tape, desperate, but he only chuckled, humming tunelessly as he picked up a cleaver. He raised it high, and that's when I noticed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, just above the counter. If I could reach it. I shifted, rocking the table. It groaned, unsteady on its legs. He froze, glaring at me. "Be still," he growled. I rocked again, harder. The table tipped, sending me crashing to the floor. Pain exploded in my shoulder, but I didn't stop. I rolled, slamming into the wall. The extinguisher rattled loose, clattering beside me. I clawed for it with bound hands just as he lunged. His knife slashed down, missing my face by inches. With every ounce of strength, I smashed the extinguisher into his skull. He howled, dropping the knife. Blood streamed down his temple, but he wasn't finished. He grabbed me by the ankle and dragged me back toward the table, snarling like a wild animal. In a blind panic, I twisted the extinguisher valve and blasted him in the face with the thick white spray. He screamed, clawing at his eyes, stumbling backward into the counter. Knives rained to the floor. That was my chance. I tore the gag from my mouth with my teeth, hacked through the duct tape with a fallen blade, and bolted for the door. The hallway seemed endless, the walls closing in on me. But somehow I made it to the front entrance. I burst into the street, barefoot, drenched in extinguisher dust, screaming for help. The police found him hours later, still in his apartment, sitting calmly in the dark. His face was smeared in blood and powder, and he was rocking back and forth, whispering, "Where's the second pizza? Where's the second pizza?" They discovered refrigerators in his kitchen, 3 of them, all packed with neatly wrapped packages of human meat. I quit Uber Eats that night. Haven't driven since. And sometimes, when I try to sleep, I hear his voice again, quiet and obsessive, like he's still waiting for me to come back with that missing order. Where's the second pizza? It was late, maybe close to midnight, and the rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to bury the earth. I was driving home from a late shift, bone tired, just wanting my bed. The highway signs kept flashing detours because of flooding, and soon I found myself on some back road I didn't recognize. No lights, no houses, just endless stretches of slick pavement and walls of trees bending under the storm. My GPS froze and the radio turned to static. That was when I saw it, a flickering neon sign through the curtain of rain. Hollow Road Rest Stop, open. I almost laughed. A rest stop? Out here? It looked abandoned, just one tiny brick building with gas pumps so old the prices still had cents after the decimal. But the lights were on. I pulled in, desperate for shelter and maybe a coffee to keep me awake. When I stepped inside, the bell over the door jingled weakly. The air was thick, humid, and smelled of rust. The place was empty. Rows of dusty snacks, a broken soda machine humming in the corner, and fluorescent lights that flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. "Hello?" I called out. From behind the counter, a man stood up slowly. His clothes were dated, like something out of the 80s. A trucker cap pulled low with greasy hair sticking out beneath it. His grin stretched too wide, showing teeth that looked too sharp in the fluorescent light. "Rough night for driving," he said, voice like gravel. I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, thought I'd wait out the rain." He didn't answer right away, just kept staring at me until finally he said, "You're not supposed to be here after dark." My stomach tightened. I tried to laugh it off, but he just tilted his head, like a dog listening for something. That's when I heard it too, dripping. Slow, steady drips echo from the back hallway of the rest stop. The air smelled stronger back there, not just rust, something metallic. "Bathroom's back there if you need it," the man said, still grinning. Against my better judgment, I walked toward the sound. The hallway was long, too long for a building that small. The lights buzzed overhead, dimmer the farther I went. The dripping got louder. The smell got worse. I reached the bathroom door. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. The floor was covered in water, but not rainwater. The tiles were smeared with something dark and red, pooling near the drains. And in the corner, slumped against the wall, was a man, pale, drenched, his chest caved in like he'd been crushed. His eyes were open-eyed, staring right at me. I stumbled back, nearly slipping. When I turned to run, the hallway behind me wasn't empty anymore. It was lined with people, or what used to be people. Their faces were slack, water dripping from their hair, their clothes soaked through, their mouths hung open, and from each one, a slow stream of black water spilled down their chins. They moved toward me, feet dragging, their hands reaching. I sprinted back to the front, screaming. The man behind the counter didn't move. He just watched, smiling, as if he'd been expecting me all along. "They never leave once they come in," he said. I shoved past him, bolted through the door, and jumped into my car. My hands shook as I jammed the keys into the ignition. The figures pressed against the windows, their hands leaving streaks of water across the glass. When my car finally roared to life, I tore out of our parking lot, tires skidding across the wet asphalt. I didn't look back, not once. The next day, I drove down that same stretch of road in the daylight, determined to see the place again, maybe to prove to myself I'd imagined it. But when I got there was nothing. Just an empty lot, overtaken by weeds. No building, no neon sign, no pumps. I stopped a local at the gas station miles away and asked about it. He frowned and said the Hollow Road rest stop had been shut down in 1992 after a flash flood drowned 7 people trapped inside during the storm. Now and then, he said, drivers swear they still see the lights on during heavy rain. I haven't driven that way since, but sometimes, on nights when the storm rages hardest, I wake up to the sound of dripping. And once, just once, I found wet footprints trailing across my kitchen floor. It was a late Friday night, the kind where the rain never stops tapping against the windows, and the streets outside are deserted. I was halfway through a horror movie, curled up on the couch, when my phone buzzed. "Your Uber Eats delivery is arriving soon." I froze. I hadn't ordered anything. I thought maybe it was a glitch or someone nearby had typed in the wrong address. Still, I got up and checked the front door, just in case. 5 minutes later, headlights cut through the rain. A dark blue van pulled into my driveway. No stickers, no Uber Eats light. The engine sputtered as if it barely ran. The man who stepped out wasn't wearing any delivery gear. No hat, no uniform, not even a hot bag. Instead, he carried a plain, grease-stained cardboard box. His clothes looked wrong. A black trench coat soaked from the rain, shoes caked with mud, and gloves, thick leather gloves. He rang the bell once. Through the peephole, I could see his face. Long, stringy hair plastered to his cheeks, pale skin, and a grin that stretched too far. His lips moved, like he was whispering something to himself. I didn't open the door. "Wrong house," I called through the wood. "I didn't order anything." For a long moment, silence. Then his grin widened. "It's already paid for. Let me in." Every instinct screamed at me to stay quiet. I backed away, heart racing, and grabbed my phone. Through the peephole, I saw him tilt his head like a broken doll before slowly walking back to the van. Relief washed over me. Maybe he'd leave. But he didn't. He just sat there, in the driver's seat, engine idling, staring at the house. The rain blurred the windshield, but I could feel his eyes locked on me. He stayed for nearly 20 minutes before finally pulling away. I tried to calm down, convincing myself it was some scam or mistake. But later that night, close to 2 a.m., a sound snapped me awake. The kitchen door creaked open. I crept out of bed, clutching a lamp like a weapon. The kitchen window was shattered, glass glittering on the tiles. And on the table sat the same grease-stained cardboard box. My stomach turned. The box wasn't empty. Inside was raw meat. Not from a store, but something stringy, unwrapped, with fur still clinging to it. A trail of blood led from the table across the floor. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, wet. I darted back into my room, locking the door and crawling under the bed, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. The silence was worse than the sound. And then,
The box slid under the crack. Blood smeared across the wood as he whispered from the hallway, voice low and trembling. "It's dinner time." I couldn't hold in my gasp. The knob twisted, the lock rattled violently. He slammed against the door again and again, screaming now, voice cracking into high-pitched laughter. "You're not grateful. You're wasting it." I dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispering into the phone that someone had broken in. The dispatcher told me to stay quiet, that officers were on the way. Minutes felt like hours. The pounding suddenly stopped. Silence. Then, I heard him whisper right against the door, "Next time, you'll eat." By the time the police arrived, the intruder was gone. The only thing left behind was the shattered window, the bloody box, and muddy footprints leading back into the rain. The worst part? When they dusted for prints, the officers told me the gloves he wore were stitched with human skin. I moved the very next week, but even now, whenever I hear a knock at the door after dark, I freeze, because part of me believes he's still out there, waiting to deliver my next meal.